Seems like overnight we see the world in a different light. What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1109 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Electronic Products Recycling Association. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. And Canna Cabana. The lowest prices on cannabis. Guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut, is singer-songwriter Dan Hill. Dan, welcome to Toronto Mic'd.
My pleasure. Great to be here. Thank you.
And I want to thank FOTM Blair Packham as well, because I understand, you'll have to tell me if this is true or not, but he basically cornered you at Song Studio and talked you into making your Toronto Mic debut. Is that at all accurate?
Well, what he had to tell me about what you guys do was really, really interesting and inspiring. So I was really happy that he was able to facilitate this.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Blair just earned himself another Palma Pasta lasagna. So
Perfect.
I'll be taking care of him. You're a Toronto guy, Dan, so I'm really looking forward to this. But what neighborhood did you grow up in?
Well, I grew up in Don Mills. I guess now it's really referred to as North York. So, my dad bought the house. Actually, it's the house that I live in now in 1965 for $18,000, which was at that time, as you know, considered to be a terrific amount of money.
Right.
So ever since 1965, I've pretty much lived here.
Amazing. Now, glad we're talking about your dad off the top here, because I got a great note. And throughout this conversation, I'll sprinkle in messages I got from listeners when they found out Dan Hill was going to be on Toronto Mic'd. But Rock Golf, that's what he calls himself on Twitter. He says, amazing family. His father was an Ontario ombudsman. His brother wrote the best-selling The Book of Negroes. Tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, off the top, before we get into your great career. What was it like growing up in a family where basically I would say writing is in your blood?
Well, Dad made it clear to all of us by the time we were 3 that if we wanted anything, we had to write a letter. So, for example, if my brother wanted to have a kitten, he would have to write a very articulate letter explaining why he wanted this kitten and what responsibilities he would take. So the power of the word, the written word and the spoken word was absolutely paramount in our family.
Amazing. And here's a little interesting note here, and I'm wondering when we can make this happen. But it seems like your dad was made an officer of the Order of Canada back in 1999. Have you yet received that same honor, Dan?
No, my brother has, though. But remember, it was, unfortunately, my dad, this has nothing to do with me, but my dad actually was given this honor far too late. When he finally got this honor, he was too enfeebled to actually go to Ottawa. So at the time, Adrian Clarkson came to our house. I've had my success has been much, much more profound in America than in Canada. My songs have always done better elsewhere. So therefore, I don't expect that I'm going to be getting any of these kind of awards in Canada.
Well, Dan, I hate to burst your bubble there, but very recently I had Donovan Bailey on the program, and I was outraged that Donovan had not yet been made an officer of the Order of Canada, and I kind of pled the case during his episode of Toronto Mic'd. And next thing you know it, he was made an officer of the Order of Canada. So I think I can do the same for you.
Thank you. Well, that's great that you did that for Donovan Bailey. Obviously, if anyone would deserve it, it would be him. So great. I'm so happy that he has that honor, well deserved, and I'm really, really touched that you advocated for Donovan Bailey.
And I'm going to do the same for you, Dan. Don't worry. Here's a great note from a gentleman named David Lonsdale. He writes in, as a former classmate of Dan Hill at Victoria Park Secondary School, I don't have any clear memory of seeing him attend any classes, but plenty of memories of Dan strumming his guitar sitting under the staircases to the second floor. VPSS was very loosey-goosey about attendance at that time, and it was clearly a perfect high school situation for Dan. So what do you say about David's memories here and, discovering that you had this musical gift?
Well, he's accurate. He's very accurate. I did not attend a lot of classes. I did not finish high school, and I was always with my guitar, and I was playing it everywhere, in the portables, in front of the portables, in the classrooms, in the bathrooms. I was just my guitar was pretty much glued to my side since I started playing it when I was, say, 7 or 8.
I understand that when you're in high school, you're actually also singing and performing at coffee houses and at concerts.
Well, this is the thing about Toronto, which is that Toronto was a very, very rich city in regards to where you could perform live. If you were, at the time, it was called folk singers. We weren't called singer-songwriters, say, in the 60s. There were so many church basements, so many unbelievable coffee houses, restaurants, bars, even places like the CNIB, Canadian National Institute. There were probably literally about 100 different places in Toronto where you could perform for free, for example, or you could listen to shows. For example, as you know, the Riverboat had everybody from Gordon Lightfoot to Neil Young to Joni Mitchell to James Taylor to Jackson Browne to Harry Chapin. I could go on, all as they were on their ascent. And I as a kid went to every one of these shows. And also there was a coffee house called Grumbles. One week they had Randy Newman and Jim Croce as a co-headliner. So I don't think there was a better city in the world for live music at that time. So I was everywhere. I played everywhere. There were kind of like audition nights, where you could do 1 or 2 songs, hootenanny nights. It was who used to live here and played here all the time? Rick James. Did you know that? Yes,
because he was a draft dodger.
Yeah, and he did a lot of work actually with Neil Young.
Minor Birds, is that what they were? The Minor Birds?
Very good. So again, yet another Toronto landmark, yet another superstar that passed through Toronto on the way to the top.
Now, did you ever play the Purple Onion?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, yes. So here's just a quick fun fact. So one of the sponsors of this very program is Sticker U, and Andrew Witkin is the founder of Sticker U. Well, Andrew's father, Barry Witkin, was the owner of the Purple Onion.
Amazing. Well, kudos to him. Yeah, that was an incredible club. You could also, even though the drinking age, I believe at this time was 18, by the time I was 15, I was getting in and playing in these establishments, lying about my age. They didn't check for my ID. So I'd be playing these bars, on, for example, Jarvis Street, singing my songs when I was 15.
Okay, amazing. Now, I'm going to do like a teaser because later in this conversation, we're going to get into a charity single, Tears Are Not Enough by the Northern Lights. But in that song, you're sandwiched between Joni Mitchell and Neil Young.
Yes, it was beyond an honor. It was 1985. I had to sing into a modulation, a cold modulation, meaning there was no musical preparation. So I'm going, oh my God, just my luck that I've given one of the hardest lines to sing in the song, but I was lucky. I nailed it immediately. And you may know this, but on February 24th, there's the induction into the Canadian Songwriter Hall of Fame ceremony at Massey Hall. And people that sang in the 1985 video single, we will be singing it at that night, meaning the people that are still around. Sadly, as you know, a lot of people have died since '85. So speaking of that iconic record, yeah, we're going to be re-performing it at Massey Hall June 24th.
So what day is that? June? You said June 24, 2023?
My mistake. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I've had too much coffee. September 24th. My mistake. So coming up.
Okay, firstly, amazing. But secondly is, remember, this is just the teaser, because when we get into Tears Are Not Enough, I have questions. But that's a heck of a teaser right there. So since we're still, we got you back in high school, how do you get signed with RCA?
I literally just sent a demo tape I'd made in my friend's studio, whereby I sang 3 of my songs and played guitar, live. So that was it. Mailed it to RCA Records. I got a call from the A&R guy a week later. He said, come on in. I want to see if you're as good live as you are on tape. I auditioned, and then bam, I got my contract as a singer-songwriter with RCA at 18. The interesting part is I had no connections, and that I just literally sent in a tape. That to me is kind of astonishing.
Wow. Okay, and I guess I'm wondering how it worked, because you signed with GRT Records, right? Like, so what you end up releasing your is it your self-titled debut? Your first album doesn't come out on RCA, does it?
No, I'm not going to get into RCA other than to say, although they appreciated my talents, I didn't feel that they could figure out how exactly to market me, or promote me or produce me. So I broke the contract, signed with a family that lived around the corner from me. And yes, we recorded my first album in 1974. And in 1975, it was released on GRT Records.
Is You Make Me Want to Be, is that the first Dan Hill song that you ever heard on the radio?
Yes. And interesting backstory was that Harry Belafonte loved the song so much that he flew me to New York, was singing along with my at the time demo of the song. This was when I was in 73, and he wanted to record it, but he wanted an exclusive. And as much as I loved Harry Belafonte and always had, I knew that I wasn't good enough that I could compete with the top singer-songwriters in the world, from Elton John to Bruce Springsteen, without my very best song. I couldn't come out with my second best song, and I knew at the time that my best song was You Make Me Want to Be. So I had to turn down Mr. Belafonte. Wow. Which a lot of people thought was crazy, but it turned out to be a good move, because without that song, nothing else would have happened for me.
Do you remember, Dan, which radio station you first heard You Make Me Want to Be on?
The first radio station I heard it on was Chum AM, which at the time was probably the most significant and important radio station in Canada. So, I was really lucky. They jumped on that song right away, and I still remember hearing it in my friend's car in the driveway of my house, and just, I guess you can only compare it to the first time you kiss a girl. There's nothing like the first time you hear your song on the radio.
I can only dream of these things, Dan. I've yet to hear my song on the radio, which is probably a good thing. But when you're hearing it on 1050 Chum, and we all know what 1050 Chum was when it was a top 40 radio station, by any chance, do you remember which jock was on which jock was on the radio when they kicked out your jam?
I'm trying to think. He had a nickname. I think it was Shotgun. It was Shotgun something.
Tom Rivers.
Exactly. Man, you're good. Yeah. Shotgun Tom Rivers. That was the first time I heard it.
He's no longer with us. He died rather young. But Tom Rivers moved from 1050 to 680 CFTR when I first kind of got into top 40 radio. And I would wake up to Tom Rivers on 680. So I was a big fan.
And he had an amazing voice, amazing presence. And at that time, to be a DJ on a station like Chum was akin to that you were your own celebrity in a sense, not unlike what happened with the VJs at Much Music, say in the 80s. So these DJs were held in the highest regard.
Amazing. Okay, my friend, you gave me permission to play a little music during our chat, and I think it's going to help things. So I'm actually going to, and I hope you're comfortable hearing yourself, and you should be, because this is a heck of a song that still means a lot to so many of us. But let me play a little bit of a certain Dan Hill hit, and then we got to talk about it. So
Sure.
You ask me if I love you, and I choke on my reply. I'd rather hurt you honestly than mislead you with a lie. And who am I to judge you on what you say or do? I'm only just beginning to see the real you. And sometimes when we touch, the honesty's too much, and I have to close my eyes and hide. I wanna hold you till I die, till we both break down and cry. I wanna hold you till the fear in me subsides.
Dan, you wrote yourself a big hit here that I legitimately think means just an awful lot to not just Canadians, but the whole world. And I'm dying to know how this song came together.
Well, there's two different parts to the song. I originally wrote the song in 1973 when I was 19, and it was written because a female I was involved in, an older woman, was giving me a hard time. Basically, I wanted to be in an exclusive relationship with her, and she was in a relationship with a lot of the other guys. At the time, I was making $1.89 an hour at the civil service. I had some action on my songs as a songwriter, but obviously I wasn't a big shot to her. So she was going out with older guys. She was going out with football players, and I felt I had to write a song that would make her feel that I was worthy of her exclusive attention. I thought that was my only chance. So 2 days coming home from the civil service, I wrote Sometimes When We Touch. She would always ask me if I loved her, and if I said yes, she'd say you're too needy. If I said no, she said you're too cold. So that's why this song started with, you ask me if I love you, and I choke on my reply. Anyway, so I kind of felt as I wrote the song that lyrically, I touched on things no one had ever touched on before. I just kind of knew it, and so I phoned her up, played her the song. Back then, you would play songs to women, over the phone with your guitar like this and holding the phone like that. And I play her the song thinking, this is it. Now she's just going to want to be with me. And there was a martyred sigh afterwards. She said, Danny, did anyone ever tell you for a 19-year-old, you're too damned intense? I'm moving in with a football player. So the song chased her out of the country. And then what happened is by the time 1977 occurred, I'd already had 2 big albums in Canada, but I was set up with one of the greatest melody writers in the world, Barry Mann, who co-wrote, for example, You've Lost That Love and Feeling, which is actually the most played song of all time. And I gave him my lyric. He came up with the music to Sometimes When We Touch. 77, 22, I went back to Toronto, cut the song. I was 22, having absolutely no idea what was going to happen. There's no way in the world you could predict, what was going to happen with a song like that. So we knew it was a special song. We were afraid that it was too real, that people may be frightened by it, because I was saying stuff that men don't traditionally say in songs.
Right.
And so we didn't know if that would frighten people. We knew it would be a hit unless it happened to be just too good and too ahead of its time.
And by hit, I mean, this was number 3 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. Number 1 in Canada, but that Billboard Hot 100, that is sort of the de facto chart that we always talk about. And number 3, do you remember what song, and I don't have this at my disposal, I'm hoping you remember, but do you remember what song, was number 1, like sort of blocked you from number 1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100?
At the time, the biggest selling record in the world was the Bee Gees' Saturday Night Fever.
Right.
And they were going for a 1, 2, 3 sweep. For example, they had Staying Alive, they had How Deep Is Your Love, and Night Fever. Those were the 3 songs. And so I was 3. So I broke up their sweep, the sweep of 1, 2, and 3. So because of sometimes they ended up being 1, 2, and 4.
Wow, and I mean that jam was such a big hit that next thing you know it, you're on the Merv Griffin show, you're on the Mike Douglas show. This is quite the heyday for you.
Well, it was at that time, it was just so crazy in terms of the work involved with keeping on top of this hit. And interestingly enough, it took over countries and continents 3 months at a time, because today, if you release a single, it's out around the world at the same time. Back then, a hit in Canada for 3 months, then it became a hit in America for 3 months, then it became a hit in Europe, then Asia. So I was literally chasing that song around the world. The good thing is I didn't have time to think, wow, this is amazing, I have a hit. No, I was just too busy. I just had so many shows I had to do.
Wow. Very interesting email came in from Steve Cole, who's a listener of this program. Steve said, in fact, he sent me these clips. I'm going to forward them to you when I get a hold of your email address, just because you might be interested to read this. But he says, here's a newspaper article from 1978 that says an unnamed Toronto music critic who was a Hill hater, that's in quotes, Hill hater. How can there be a Hill hater? Anyway, bet 4 music industry insiders a Chinese dinner from the best restaurant in the world that sometimes when we touch would stiff and never make the charts. This article wonders if Hill is aware of this bet. So the question from Steve, I think the obvious one is, Dan, were you aware of this bet that existed with this music industry insider and critic at the time?
Yeah. Yes, I was aware of that. This is the deal is, the song scared a lot of people, and obviously not only did it become a hit around the world, but you can never foresee anything like this, but it then became a classic. So in this particular case, the facts speak for themselves, the stats speak for themselves. But yeah, the Canadian critics did not like me. Back then, you weren't supposed to be vulnerable as a male. That was thought of as being an egregious weakness. Nowadays, everything's changed so much. To be vulnerable as a male is supposed to be healthy, you see. So it threatened a lot of men because it was so vulnerable, and the vocal was a pretty erotic vocal, again,
right.
Not a lot of people saying that way with that kind of tone and that kind of breathiness. So yeah, it scared the bejesus out of a lot of people. And they would say stuff like I was an embarrassment to the Canadian music industry, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't see that actually that song probably funded about 1,000 jobs for Canadians and paid millions of dollars into the Canadian, economy because of the taxes.
Did you know who that critic was?
Well, there were a few critics. I knew most of the. Well, the music business in Canada at that time, again, we're talking 1970s, pretty small business. There were not a lot of people putting out international hit records in Canada. There was Gordon Lightfoot, there was the Guess Who, and there was
Anne Marie,
and myself, right? So. I knew who they were, but I did not communicate with them. I didn't phone them or complain. I did not write. Part of the deal is if you have decided that you want to try to be quote unquote a famous person, you have to accept the good with the bad. So I couldn't be pocketing millions of dollars in royalties on the one hand, and then bemoaning the blowback I was getting from critics at the other. That was just part of the job. So yeah, there was a lot of that. But remember, I think it was Frank Sinatra that said, "Success is the best revenge."
Yes.
So I just kept my mouth shut and just kept on doing what I did.
Well, it's interesting to look back, and that maybe in 1978 there was this sentiment that men couldn't be, feely, like we couldn't be emotional like that, because that's a generation raised by men who worship John Wayne, right? Like this. I don't want to blame John Wayne for everything, but there's, when we watch like Wonder Years, the dad on Wonder Years, not a touchy-feely, huggy, lovey dad.
Well, this is the thing that was I found to be the most interesting is who did I listen to? 25-year-old white male critics, or Tina Turner, Dolly Parton, Rod Stewart, Barry Manilow? So I would much rather have Tina Turner loving Sometimes When We Touch and Dolly Parton, who says it's the best song ever written, than pay attention to some 25-year-old critic who's a failed musician. No, that's the reality. I had a choice as to who to listen to.
So I didn't realize Dolly said that. That's that's amazing. So Dolly said that Sometimes When I Touch was the greatest song she'd ever heard, or something to that effect?
Yeah, she said she wished she'd written it, and she cut it as a duet with Kenny Rogers, along with Tammy Wynette. So, and the other thing that you may not know is when that song came out, there was a huge demonstration by feminists in New York claiming that my line, "At times I'd like to break you and drive you to your knees," advocated violence towards women. They did not seem to figure out that it was a metaphorical line. But the minute Tina Turner and Dolly Parton put it out, there were no more demonstrations claiming that it advocated violence. So apparently a woman could sing it and it was cool, but a man couldn't sing it. So there's all of this kind of crazy stuff going on, at which point I just said, whatever.
Well, listen, Dan, there's so many great covers, as you just alluded to, but I actually pulled 3. So is it cool? And I pulled Tina's as well, but can I play a little bit of 3 covers and just to get hear what you thought of these covers?
Sure.
Okay. You mentioned Tina. Let's start with her.
Choke on my reply. I'd rather hurt you honestly than mislead you with lies. But who am I to judge you on what you say or do? I'm only just beginning to see the real you. Oh, but sometimes when we touch, the honesty is too much, and I have to close my eyes and hide. I wanna hold you till I die, till we both break down and cry. I wanna hold you till the fear in me subsides.
Wow. Okay, Dan, what do we think of Tina Turner's cover of Sometimes When We Touch? So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the song playing, so I'm going to let it play while we wait for Dan to unfreeze. He actually had a Zoom issue, so let's bring back Tina, and then we'll get Dan reconnected here. It's going great. Thank you, Dan Hill. Dan, I figured while you left the Zoom because of a connectivity issue, I just let Tina belt it out, so we're all good here. What do you think of Tina Turner's version of your Sometimes When We Touch?
I loved it. She told me that she heard the song when she was still in a very bad relationship with Ike, and that song spoke to her. So then she went out and purchased all my albums at that point. So what I love about her version is that the church in her voice and her interpretation. Also, she seemed to she took it on in a more aggressive way than I did, which is great. The whole point of an interpretation of someone's song is to do it in a different way. So, she's one of the greatest of all time, obviously. And I feel that her cover, I can't think of a better cover of that song than Tina's. I loved the power, the soul, the church. And I loved how she was kind of aggressive with it.
Oh, yeah, no argument here. But there's another great cover I'm going to play here for us.
You ask me if I love you, and I choke on my reply. I'd rather hurt you honestly than mislead you with a lie. And who am I to judge you in what you say or do? I'm only just beginning to see the real you. And sometimes when we touch, the honesty's too much, and I have to close my eyes and hide. I wanna hold you till I die, till we both break down and cry. I wanna hold you till the fear in me subsides.
Dan, how's Rod doing here?
He's one of my favorite singers. The story on Rod and this song is that Rod Stewart, I should say, is that he heard the song right after his mom died, and so he cried. It's for some reason he took that song and it brought him back to his mom, and he was moved so much by the song juxtaposed with him just losing his mother that was why he recorded the song. The great thing about music is that if you hear a song that you really love, you remember the first time you heard it. So I still remember the first time I heard Maggie May when it was a hit. I was in Vancouver, courting a girl who didn't think I was worthy, and that song was just bam. So, again, extremely surprising for me, extremely flattering. When we wrote the song, when I cut it, I never in a million years assumed that it would end up being one of the most covered songs of all time. I didn't think anyone would cut it because it was so darn personal. You see what I'm saying? So
right.
That's the thing about music, is the beautiful thing about it is it's not formulaic and it's not predictable. I think the fact that I didn't think it was coverable was probably one of the things that made it coverable. You see what I'm saying?
Well, what's interesting, what you're saying is that it was personal to you, but it's a universal sentiment. We can all relate.
And that's what you never know. Like obviously that's something we all aspire to, but you don't know if it's something that is just so inner, so insular, I should say, that people don't get it, or if it's insular in the way that it speaks to people. So that is, again, something that you can't really predict. But in my experience throughout my careers, it's always been my most personal songs that have done the best.
Now, I got one more here, and then we're going to move on from this wonderful song. But this one's a more recent one, and I think he had more involvement in it. So I'm going to let... I should point out, my wife is of Filipino descent, and when this gentleman was on the top of the boxing circuit, it was appointment viewing, so let's just hear a little bit of this one.
You ask me if I love you, and I choke on my reply. I'd rather hurt you honestly than mislead you with a lie. And who am I to judge you on what you say or do? I'm only just beginning to see the real you. And sometimes when we touch, the honesty's too much, and I have to close my eyes and hide. I wanna hold you till I die,
That, of course, is Manny Pacquiao. Do you have a story here? How did this come to be?
Well, a friend of mine said, "You guys see what's going on the TV?" And she takes me to where the TV is, and I see this Filipino man singing "Sometimes When We Touch" on a big talk show in America, and there were all these Filipino women in the audience going absolutely crazy. And I didn't know at the time who Manny Pacquiao was, but I've been quickly found out, and one thing led to another. And he'd gone public saying his 3 favorite songs of all time were "Imagine," "Yesterday," and "Sometimes When We Touch." Wow. So we got together and made the record of "Sometimes When We Touch." And I coached him through the vocal. A lot of times now I'm like the vocal teacher, right? And so we went to Capitol Studios in America, where Frank Sinatra and Elvis used to record. Right. And he recorded it there. I was in the studio. I sang harmonies, some of the choruses. And I got to know and befriend Manny, who's an amazing guy. And we ended up going all over the world together, with this song that he'd recorded. But the fun part for me is it was an entree into the world of boxing, which in and of itself is a wacko world. You can only imagine. So that was a tremendous adventure for me. I would go to his press conferences. We'd be hanging out after one of his fights. We'd be singing all night long. So it was a great experience working with Manny and traveling with him. He's a very, very nice and sweet person. And
some say he's the future president of the Philippines.
Right. Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Absolutely. That's true.
Rob Del Mundo wrote in and asked, did Manny give you any boxing lessons?
No. But funny thing is, though, that he'd always want me to see his fights. And, of course, to get a front row ticket to see him fight in Vegas, something like crazy, like $18,000. And I kept saying, Manny, you have to understand, I don't want to see you get hit. It'd be like going to see my brother get hit. But he didn't seem to see it that way. He kind of saw it as this grand performance, and so he would give me all these tickets to watch him. And I was honest. I said, I can't go to this, but I would join him after the fight and hang out in his dressing room. Or again, he fought 12 rounds with Mosby. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yes.
And then had the incredible endurance and strength to go and perform for 6 hours afterwards. How in the heck could anybody be that strong? So, he's a very, very sweet guy, very funny, and he's gifted at all. He's one of these guys that can do everything. He's a great dart player. He's great at pool, great at bowling. He just seems to be gifted at so many different things.
See, he probably sees it like having you there front row for one of his bouts would be the same as if you had him front row for your Massey Hall performance or something like that.
That's exactly how he saw it. And again, extremely generous. He had quite the entourage. When we were working together at the Capitol Studios, someone in the entourage secretly filmed us and then sold it to a TV station in the Philippines, and suddenly it was blasted around Asia. So again, in some ways, the boxing business is similar to the music business in terms of it can be pretty out of control and lawless and unregulated. Right. So it was interesting to see the differences and the parallels between the two worlds.
Interesting. Absolutely. Now, you didn't get boxing lessons, but I did get a note from a Leslie, and Leslie wants to know if you still run, because he says that she was in a running clinic with you in the mid-2000s. She doesn't think you'll remember her, but she was in a running clinic with you, and she wants to know what's your 5K personal best.
Well, yes, I remember being in that running club with you, Leslie. I do run. I'm still a habitual runner. I started running competitively at the age of 11. And luckily, often your childhood habits can determine the rest of your life. So it imbued in me this wonderful discipline. So I'm running actually the same routes now that I ran when I was 12, living in the same house.
Right. Amazing. Okay, now we tease this off the top, but I should preface this, Dan, by saying I've recorded a 2.5-hour episode with Cam Gordon where all we did was talk about tears are not enough. So It's a mild, I won't call it an infatuation, but a passion. I just love dissecting it and everything. So what can you tell me, who did you get the phone call from Bruce Allen? Like, what detail do you have where you found out that you were being asked to perform on this charity single by the Northern Lights?
Right. It came through David Foster, who, as you know, is beyond an iconic songwriter, producer, legend. But already by 1985, he was probably the one of the biggest producers and most successful songwriters in the world. So, as you know, he wrote the song with Bryan Adams and Jim Vallance, and I'm not sure, there may have been 2 other writers on the song. So, in his capacity as a producer, he reached out and asked if I could do it, and of course, I was thrilled and honored to do it. It happened at Manta Sound, the studio at Sherborne in Adelaide, which is where I recorded my first 5 albums.
Wow.
And so I felt like I was returning home in a sense. The number of major legendary star celebrity artists was just pretty much overwhelming. And for some people, it was a little bit intimidating, because when you were singing, you knew that Joni Mitchell and Gordon Lightfoot and Neil Young would be watching you. And so regardless of whatever you'd done in terms of your past hits, you kind of felt like you were, on trial there, seeing if you could deliver on a song that you didn't write. So it was very intense, among other things, just the intensity of having all that star power around you.
Did you so like one story I've always heard is that, Geddy Lee did it all in one take, like, because the Geddy Lee hook in that song, I absolutely love. Your part's great too. I'm actually going to play it in a second here, but Geddy Lee nails it in one take. How many takes did you get?
I nailed it in the first take, but David Foster said it was a great take, and he had me do more takes, but I couldn't beat the first take. So the take that my line that I'm singing was my first take.
Okay, it's 8 seconds. I mentioned you were the meat in the Joni Mitchell Neil Young sandwich. I want to ask about that in a moment, but here's here's you in your solo.
Seems like overnight we see the world in a different light.
Woo. Okay, so short but sweet. I was gonna stick the whole song in there, but I didn't know how much time you'd have. But I will like the fact. Like, did you know you were? I guess at the time you record that, do you know that you're following Joni and that Neil's gonna come right after you?
That's a really good question. Given I think this is 37 years ago. I knew that all these people were on the song, though that being said, there's no guarantee that they would stay on the song. If their vocal performances weren't up to par, it didn't matter if you were like a superstar, you wouldn't make the final cut. So I don't think I knew at the time. I don't think David Foster, well, he obviously must have known, because he'd already assigned the parts to all of us. Right. That being said, though, no, at that time I did not know I was going to be a sandwich between two of the greatest songwriters of all time.
And another famous story, I think I asked Leona Boyd about this, and I think she confirmed it, but you can also corroborate it. But like, I guess Neil Young does his take, and then David Foster wants Neil Young to be more in tune. And I guess Neil has a reaction, something to the effect of, that's like my sound, man.
That's exactly what happened. And David Foster is a bit of we call them intonation freaks, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. One of the great things about singing back then is not everything was perfectly in tune, whereas now when there is auto-tune, it just seems a little bit too perfect. So that's exactly what went down, and Neil Young was right to say, no, this is it. Take me the way I am. Right.
We would accept nothing else. And I think the famous sign there was something to the effect of like leave your ego at the door or something like that, because this is, of course, for famine relief in Africa, and it's a charity single.
There were some people that were egomaniacs. I'm not going to say who.
Oh.
For the most part, everybody was very, very well behaved, but there was one person, I'll just say he was one of the leaders of Platinum Blonde, who behaved kind of like a diva.
Okay, well, I obviously was not there, but I did see the footage of people arriving, and a guy whose name rhymes with Dark Combs. His name rhymes with he did arrive in a limo.
Yeah, I don't want to. He was the one that kind of acted out the most dramatically, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun. The thing about rock and roll, unlike, say, the book business, you get a lot of authors around, and their behavior, there's more pressure on authors to behave well, right? Whereas the great thing about rock and roll is you can pretty much behave any way you like as long as you can deliver the goods, usually meaning a hit song.
Right.
And so there's always going to be spectacularly inappropriate behavior when you put a bunch of rock and rollers together, which I love. It's like walking into a Tarantino movie.
Oh, no, yeah, you had me at hello there. I agree 100%. One little side note, and she's also an FOTM. So I should point out to you, you're like, Mike, what's an FOTM? You keep saying this. That's Friend of Toronto Mike. Dan, you're now an FOTM, so you'll be carrying this badge of honor like the future Order of Canada you're going to receive. You're going to be wearing this forever. So you're an FOTM. But Leona Boyd is also an FOTM, and we had a great chat. But she did arrive to this thing in a fur jacket. I just remember thinking that it seemed like a strange thing to wear to a benefit concert for famine relief. But that's Leona being Leona.
Yeah, and she was not a diva, but a big part of Leona's success, this is not to take away from her natural gifts, was her kind of her persona, her image, the fact that she had been in relationships with Pierre Trudeau and with Fidel Castro. And so it's befitting that she would do that because there was such a huge kind of mythology around Leona, unlike, say, most of, when you think of Neil Young or Gordon Lightfoot or Joni Mitchell, you don't tend to think of their image or their persona. You just think, oh my God, If You Could Read My Mind is the greatest song of all time.
Right.
With Leona, there was this whole other thing going around.
And Leona was pen pals with Prince Philip, I think, right up until the very end. And now I'm wondering, just because Queen Elizabeth II passed away just last week, but did you ever meet the Queen?
No, my brother, when he won the Commonwealth Award for fiction, had a wonderful meeting with the Queen, in London, and he said that she was not only with it and very, very smart, but she was very curious as to Black history in England. So his experience with her was absolutely wonderful.
Okay, great. All right, my friend. So this is 85. And when you first heard the finished product, Tears Are Not Enough, what were your initial thoughts when you heard it for the first time?
I thought it was great. I was never particularly a fan of We Are the World. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the people that participated in We Are the World. Beyond a fan of Quincy Jones, to say the least. But it just seemed a little bit too, self-involved, maybe, too self-important. We are the world, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I thought that Tears Are Not Enough seemed a little bit more personal, So, I really preferred that song in terms of what the song was meant to do.
And how satisfied were you with your vocals?
I was really happy with, the thing about being an artist is you're never 100% satisfied. Even when I hear some of my hits on the radio, I think, man, I could have sung that better, But that being said, I felt quite good with the part that I did sing.
Okay, so this is 85 when you record the Tears Are Not Enough single. And at that time, now, real talk here, you're right, a bunch of Canadian hits, but there's only the one big, if I'm correct, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but there's only the one big, at this point in your career, you have the one big U.S. hit. Is any pressure, are you feeling any pressure at this point in your career that you might be one of those one-hit wonders that show up in, in trivia games, etc.? You don't want to, was there anything like, oh, I need a second hit?
Well, what had happened since then, though, was that I had co-written a song that became a bigger hit for me everywhere except North America, which was In Your Eyes, which I wrote with the late, great Michael Massa. That was a smash around the world for George Benson, Jeffrey Osborne, and actually ended up making me more money, and still makes me more money than Sometimes When We Touch. So that as a writer, I already knew, it's always been my case that my songs have always done much better than me. There are lots of Canadians that could outdraw me, say at Massey Hall, but there's not too many that have the track record I have as a songwriter. So having In Your Eyes as a hit, then having the theme for Rambo, First Blood as a hit all around the world, but North America. So I wasn't too concerned with it because I knew I would always have a success as a writer. That being said, when I wrote Can't We Try and recorded it in 1986, I pretty well knew that was going to be a smash. I knew that finally I could prove to the world that I could also, as a recording artist, have an American hit.
Well, I'm going to actually, you're stealing my thunder here, Dan. Come on. I'm going to play that in a moment, but I just got to read another note from Joe Louis. Joe Louis said, this is for Dan Hill. Well, of course, Joe, I'm collecting questions for Dan Hill. Okay, back to Joe. I just wanted to point out the contrast of It's a Long Road as the closing credits song for the violent and bloody First Blood and the lovemaking backdrop possibilities of Sometimes When We Touch. He says amazing, so I think he's referring to he did tell me that First Blood is actually his favorite movie of all time. But Joe Louis wanted to make sure I read that note for you.
Well, that was part of the fun for me of recording. First of all, it's the only song I ever recorded that I didn't write. Secondly, the movie had not been totally put together and edited at that point. This was 1982, in August of 82. And it was a very demanding song to sing because, the song was written, Goldsmith, who was one of the best film composers at that time. I don't think he had a real sense of the range of a typical singer. I mean, there's no singer that can sing that song in one take because it's so high, So I sang that song. It was a real workout doing that. And I had no idea that it was going to end up being the second biggest movie of the year in '83 after E.T.
Wow.
It was I loved it because I was recording in the Abbey Road Studios. It was fun to kind of record a song I didn't write that was extremely challenging vocally, and it did really, really broaden my appeal, around the world.
Okay, so let's get this next. This by the way, this is an earworm. I actually we talked about Blair Packham off the top, and every time I hear "Last of the Red Hot Fools," which Blair wrote and performed at the Jitters, it actually gets stuck in my head and bounces around in there for quite some time. But it's been supplanted recently because I listened to "Can't We Try," which I'm going to play right now. And it really is an earworm, but I want to talk about it after I play a little bit of it. People know the jam, but here is Dan Hill with Vonda Shepard.
I see your face cloud over like a little girl's, and your eyes have lost their shine. You whisper something softly I'm not meant to hear. Baby, tell me what's on your mind.
I don't care what people say about the two of us from different worlds. I love you so much that it hurts inside. Are you listening?
Please listen to me, girl.
Can we try just a little bit harder? Can we give just a little bit more?
Can we try to understand that it's love we're fighting for?
Can we try just a little more passion?
Can we try just a little less pride? Love you so much, baby, that it tears me up inside. I hear you on the telephone to God.
Wow. So did you write that? You wrote this yourself, Dan?
Well, I wrote it myself, other than to say that my wife at the time came in as I was writing it, and she suggested one lyric change, which was when Vonda comes in the second half of the second verse. And she said, so many times I tried to tell you, but you just turned it away. So she wrote that line. Other than that, I wrote everything. Yeah.
And at that time, this is 87, Vonda Shepard's essentially unknown, right? How did Vonda get attached to this duet?
Well, we had a lot of trouble finding a woman to sing the song with me that could match my passion, frankly. Sometimes it's hard for someone to sing a song that with the same authenticity as me singing a song because I wrote it, so I can get inside the emotion more. Vonda was probably the 20th female to audition for that song. And I knew that if I couldn't find a singer that could match my vocal, that I wouldn't have a hit with this song. And it was like unbelievable fortune. The very last person, my very last day in the studio in Santa Monica, in comes Vonda in her bicycle shorts. She cycles there. She's 22. She walks up to the mic, and it was like the first two lines of the verse that she sings. I go, oh my God, this is a miracle. So there's no question that without Vonda's performance, that song would not have been a hit.
And you knew right away. You knew this was going to be a hit.
I knew it should be a hit. For a song to be a hit, obviously there has to be more than it being a hit song. You have to have all the kind of stuff behind you. You have to have a lot of record company power behind you. There has to be kind of like the zeitgeist of the times. At the time, alternative was really, really big, and people were claiming that in this alternative climate that a song like that wouldn't be a hit. But I knew if it got on the radio, it was going to be a hit, and it ended up being the #1 adult contemporary Billboard Song of the Year. So
Wow.
it was an even bigger hit than I thought it was going to be.
Wow, yeah. This one peaks at number 6, but massive hit. And Vonda was so unknown. I mean, she got pretty famous like a decade later for this theme song from Ally McBeal, Searching My Soul, which was a big jam for her. But they spelled her name wrong, apparently, on the label for this single, Can't We Try?
Yeah, sometimes they would misspell Vonda, which is, I believe, a Russian name, and also they would misspell Shepherd. Yeah, I've been very lucky to have discovered amazing singers before they become famous. I mean, because of Can't We Try, Celine Dion came into my life because I needed someone to perform it with me. Vonda couldn't do it. So boom, in comes Celine. No one knows who she is. She only speaks French at that time. And without her singing Can't We Try with me, I would have won a Grammy producing Seduce Me for her on her Grammy-winning album.
Right, Falling Into You.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned Celine Dion. Yeah, so where is that Grammy right now?
Actually, I have it on top of my piano. It's kind of so to encourage me to continue to keep going back to the piano and write more songs.
Okay, amazing. Now, we're going to kind of jump around a little bit here as we wind down because it's kind of a little frenetic here. But I got to get, serious for a moment here because on I looked at my Toronto Mike Recordings calendar and I see Dave Bedini's dropping by in a couple of days. Dave is with the Rio Statics, of course, and they did the Whale Music film soundtrack. And, I mean, I know that you were close with Paul Quarrington, and I'm wondering if you could say some words about Paul.
Well, Paul and I were a folk singing duo, actually. Mm-hmm. I think I was 14 when I was 15. He was 16. He lived he lived close to me, just about a block away. His father actually taught my dad psychology at the U of T, and Paul's younger brother, Joe Quarrington, is now regarded as the greatest upright bass player in the world. So I was very lucky to be friends with the entire Quarrington family. I learned so much from Paul. He knew more about playing guitar than I did at that age because my specialty was classical guitar. And I think he kind of picked up a few things from me about singing and melody. A very, very smart guy, very, very well read. He turned me on to so many great books. He and my brother were great friends. It was one of the greatest losses of my life to see Paul die of lung cancer. And through Paul, I did meet Dave Bedini, whom I totally love and respect. He's a great guy. He's a extremely gifted individual as a writer as well as a musician.
Dan, I'm so sorry for your loss because, we lost Paul far too soon. I'm sorry for your loss there. And a fact that Bedini fans and Rio Statics fans might be interested in is that Paul has a writing credit on Claire, which is probably, I mean, if you have to pick which Rio Statics song is the most successful single, it's probably Claire. So that's
a great song. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And Dave again visits me Wednesday. Okay. I gotta get this right.
Great. Say hi to him for me.
Oh, for sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. That guy who sent me the newspaper clippings earlier had a second great comment. He says, this is Steve Cole. Steve writes, Elton John was so impressed with Dan Hill's first album that he decided to come to Toronto to record his own upcoming album. So the question from Steve for you, Dan, did you have any relationship or contact with Elton John after this Guelph meeting, or was it a one-off and Elton was never to be heard from again? And then the second question from Steve is, was there any boost to your career from the kind words and support that Elton John provided for you?
Well, first I'll provide the background. This is what connected Elton John to myself, is the man who signed me to 20th Century Records, which ultimately became the label that broke me around the world. Russ Regan, the late Russ Regan, also signed Elton John to his first American record deal, and also signed Neil Diamond. So Elton John, Neil Diamond, then myself. So when Elton John was in LA visiting his record company, Russ Regan played on my entire first album because I only had one out. And that's how Elton John was exposed to my music. one of the amazing things about Elton John is he's always been into other people's music, and he's always discovering people's music before they become so-called stars. So
Right.
what struck me about, he caught one of my concerts in Guelph. Actually, I was the opening act to the great Maria Mulder.
On the Pulp Fiction soundtrack.
Yeah, and also I remember her amazing hit, Midnight at the Oasis.
Right.
Anyway, the thing that really hit me about hanging out with Elton John 1976 in Guelph was he didn't want to talk about himself. He was probably the biggest star in the world at that time. All he wanted to talk about was me. What made you write You Make Me Want to Be a Father? I said, well, Elton, we listened to your song and we copied every production trick on that record, that we had the drum blasting in halfway through the record, just like I said, without your song, there would be no You Make Me Want to Be. But he was so humble. And so he was the opposite of being self-involved or narcissistic. So I was very impressed by his curiosity. I did end up going out for a little while with Kiki D, who, as you know, was signed to Elton John's label and had the hit with Elton, Don't Go Breaking My Heart.
Of course.
So through my relationship with Kiki D, I had some more contact with Elton John.
Wow, it's a mind blow right there for us. Okay. Tommy Boy, not the label, but a gentleman who tweeted at me this question. Ask him, and I'm not even sure what I'm asking you here, so I'll just read it.
Sure.
Ask him about his memories of singing Whole Lot of Love in the Rolston living room.
Oh, okay. I was, I loved all kinds of music as a kid. Back then, again, remember, I'm older than you, so it may have been different in your generation, but back then, boys were not supposed to like soft music, like say, Bread. And I loved Bread. I didn't care what anybody thought. So, but I loved all music. So I also really loved the Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. So I trained my singing based on Robert Plant's voice, because he had such a great voice, but also such a huge vocal range. So I listened to him on Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You when he hits those high notes, and I would replicate those vocals, singing it into my pillow, so my dad wouldn't come out and smack me around for singing too loudly. So yeah, there was a guy that I went to school with, Kevin Ralston, who was a very good bass player. So I used to go to his place, and this was at the time that Led Zeppelin was just breaking, and I would sing Led Zeppelin songs. I don't know how he put up with me, frankly. I apologize, Kevin.
That's great, because I'm trying to think, is that a club, like the Ralston bass? I mean, that's wild. Okay, thank you for explaining that one. Okay, so Basement Dweller wrote in, and he says, as a junior high school student in the mid-'80s, I happily discovered Mr. Hill's 1983 novel, Comeback, in my school library, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and I'm just wondering if he has ever thought about writing and publishing more fiction.
Well, I did have a memoir come out in 2009, and I do have a new book coming out next year. But in both of those cases, I have to admit that these books are not fiction books. They're more, well, my new book, The Healing: Confessions of a Biracial Songwriter, my experiences coming of age in Canada as a biracial performer, whereby there were really no other biracial performers or musicians other than, say, the great Oscar Peterson and Buffy Sainte-Marie. So right now I'm just sticking to prose, and most of my fiction is being thrown into my songs.
You said Buffy's name, so two fun facts for you. One is we talked about The Purple Onion, which Barry Whitkin was a co-owner of. I'm told she wrote, at least legend has it, she wrote Unknown Soldier at The Purple Onion. This is what Barry tells me anyways, but there's the first fun fact. But the second one is I spoke to Terry David Mulligan about Tears Are Not Enough, and Buffy was booked and all set to be on Tears Are Not Enough, and she apparently called Bruce Allen or something, having to bail, and Bruce said to Terry David, he said, Buffy bailed, and that expression is an expression that Terry David Mulligan has been using for decades, and now people in the FOTM community of Toronto Mike use that expression. If somebody, bails, it's Buffy, Buffy bailed. So Buffy was not on Tears Are Not Enough, but she was supposed to be on Tears Are Not Enough.
Well, she's one of my heroes, to say the least. I mean, what an extraordinary talent, putting it mildly. And her songs are going to live on forever, and she's got an amazing voice. One thing about Buffy Sainte-Marie, though, is she's the opposite of wanting to be noticed. She's not into publicity. She's not into wanting to be famous. Her work speaks for itself. So my guess is part of the reason she so-called bailed is because she just didn't want to be part of the spotlight. I've met her. She's a wonderful woman, very, very warm and personable, but she definitely is not into being known or feted, so to speak.
Well, Dan, I love that woman because I considered her my second mother because she was on Sesame Street when I was watching it every day.
Oh, yes, that's right.
The late 70s there.
I love Buffy St. Marie.
Oh, man, I do too. Canada Kev says, I always think of Catherine Fitch in the movie South of Wawa being all excited about going to the Dan Hill concert. Did you, Dan, have anything to do with that at all? This scene from this movie that Canada Kev remembers?
No, I had nothing to do with that movie other than to say that I had a vague connection with the woman who was the producer of that movie. And one of the funny things that happened is that they use Sometimes When We Touch without getting permission from myself or my co-writer. And, you can't really use a song, lots of presidential elects use songs in their campaign, but they're not allowed to do it. It's against the law. So they used that song through the movie, but then Barry Mann, the co-writer, decided that he wanted more money than they were willing to give. And so then they turned around and wanted to sue me because I hadn't warned them that Barry Mann would want a lot of money in order to use this song. So I always think about that movie and the possibility of me getting sued because of some ridiculous business oversight.
Yeah, that's not on you, man. Okay. By the way, I should have read this question when we were talking about Elton John and your concert at the University of Guelph. But Mike O wrote in and he said he wanted to know if you remembered the concert at the University of Guelph back in the mid-'70s with Elton John in attendance, as if you would forget that. But yes, you do. We talked about that. But then he says, I only know this because I was there backstage to do my first ever recorded interview with Dan as part of a college radio project. I believe Dan was the headliner with Maria Muldaur opening. Elton was in Toronto recording his double album Blue Moves and wanted to see Maria perform. As you can imagine, there was a huge buzz in the gym. I spent most of the time in Dan's dressing room, nervously waiting to meet him. Dan finally appeared and was a really lovely guy to speak with.
Well, the reality is, sorry to repeat myself,
No.
I was the opening act
Right.
of Maria Muldaur. I had not had that international hit yet. I'd had 2 albums out. That it was Sometimes When We Touch was on the 3rd album.
Right.
I love touring with Maria. I had nothing but tremendous respect, and I still do. She's still performing. Good for her. Elton John was actually he was holding some classes at the University of Guelph. Actually, that's why he was there. He was having something to do with the university. The real reason why people like Elton John and Rod Stewart were recording in Toronto was because there were tax laws in England at the time whereby if you recorded an album in England, your tax load would be way, way higher than if you went to Canada. Then there would be some kind of a loophole, a
Right.
tax loophole. That I'd love to say he was coming to Toronto because of my recording at Manta, but no, he and Rod Stewart and all sorts of other huge stars from England were coming to Canada to record because they didn't have to pay as many tax dollars.
Okay, glad you can clarify all that for Mike O, who was there. Basement Dweller wants to know, what did you think of James Blake's use of a sample from the awesome Frozen in the Night on last year's Foot Forward track?
Well, this is news to me. Thank you for informing me. I don't really, it's pretty hard to stay on top of all the different ways that my songs are used. I mean, this is not to sound disingenuous, but there's just no way. I mean, I didn't know that Cashmere was using Sometimes When We Touch in their toilet paper commercial, which I'd wish they hadn't, by the way. I had no idea that was happening until someone let me know it was happening. So I would say 95. I didn't know that in Munich, before every soccer game, 70,000 fans sing Sometimes When We Touch. Wow. It's pretty much impossible to keep track of all the action on all the different songs of mine. All I can say is I'm supremely grateful, and I feel like I'm one of the most fortunate people in the universe.
Jake the Snake. We love Jake the Snake. Jake the Snake says, any memories of performing at Festival of Friends at Gage Park in Hamilton in 77 or 78?
Yes. I did an outdoor concert in Gage Park several times. But one of the times I performed there, someone threw a beer bottle at me, and it missed my head by about half an inch. So for some reason, I remember that concert because I almost got got creamed. I've always felt a little bit more vulnerable in outdoor shows. I understand why people love to go to outdoor shows, but there's less separation, between you and the audience. And so, there's been some strange stuff happening where these kind of crazy people end up on stage or launching projectiles at you.
Man. Ken wants to know, did you know record producer Harry, and I hope I say Harry Hind?
Harry Hind.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was worried I'd butcher that, and if so, what are your memories of Harry?
He was a very, very sweet guy, very talented. He produced a lot of acts that did very, very well in Canada. And Harry actually was one of the first people to discover Shania Twain. I don't know if people know that now or not. Harry Hind was responsible for me getting my very first music publishing deal with Warner Chappell. So he became an early believer of mine when I was 19, because one of Harry's specialties was finding artists on the way up. Again, the great example being Shania Twain. And thanks to Harry, I signed my first publishing deal with Warner Chappell, and then they got the great Cleo Lane to cut my song "Seed of Music," which was a huge jazz legend, mostly in Europe. And so, yeah, Harry Hind and I were friends, and I was very, very sad to learn of his passing.
Man, okay. Now you mentioned you and Barry Mann. You been co-writing with him, the legendary Barry Mann. I mean, we're talking jams from people like Robin Thicke and Lee Aaron and 98 Degrees. Of all the songs you've written for these great artists, are there any songs you're particularly proud of co-writing?
Yeah, sure. There's a song I wrote with my friend, genius Keith Stegall, called "Back Before the War." That the great I have to look over at the platinum album. Sorry, Reba McEntire cut "Back Before the War" on her platinum selling album. I've always thought that was one of the best songs I've ever collaborated on. I do feel that "Seduce Me" is probably one of the best songs I've ever written, and it's on my album, my greatest hits album of '99, but also, of course, on Celine's legendary 40 million plus selling "Falling Into You." I don't know if I've written a better song than "Seduce Me," frankly. I like to joke that I'm one of the few people fortunate enough to make a really good living based on sexual fantasies that are unrealized. That sounds like a joke, but it's actually true that oftentimes I might be thinking about someone in an amorous way, which would never was going to happen. And that would get me to write songs like, for example, "To Be With You." That was another platinum cover song. So I would say "Seduce Me" is probably one of the best songs I've ever written.
And what are you up to these days? I know, I get my updates from my friend Blair Packham. I got to thank him again, though, because I believe in my heart, well, because it's true, that we're only talking now because Blair got your ear, and he's such a fantastic advocate for this program. And he was at my big event, TMLXX at Great Lakes Brewery last Thursday, and he performed live. And
fantastic.
And Dan, you just let me know when you want to play a TMLX event, okay?
I would be honored to. I would love to do that. You just shoot me an email and consider it done.
Okay, now I recorded that, so...
Good. I like that.
But let us know a little bit about what you're up to these days, and anything you want to share with us before we say goodbye. You've been very generous with your time, and I just love this.
Thank you. Well, I have a song that I co-wrote again with Keith Stegall. We co-wrote "I Do Cherish You," which obviously was a hit for 98 Degrees and a country hit for Mark Wills. So we have a new song out called "She Did" with the artist Nolan Sotillo, Sotillo, which I think I'm really, really excited about that song. I'm going to be recording it shortly. I'm in the process of putting out new music that I've written. I'm about to tour throughout Asia, Guam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and again, I'm probably banging away on my book about 6 hours a day, which will be out. I have a greatest hits album coming out in the spring of 2023, along with this new book. So there's a lot of preparation for the book, obviously.
And get ready in 2023 when you get that phone call that the Order of Canada is yours, because I'm going to make that happen. You deserve it.
Well, I don't know what to say other than to say that you're very, very kind. Again, my songs are more successful than Dan Hill, the so-called celebrity. The songs will always be the stars. So because of that, people, my name is kind of somewhat beneath the horizon.
Thanks again for this, Dan. You have a friend here in southwest Toronto, and if you need anything, you reach out. But thanks for your time. This was great, buddy.
It just felt like we were hanging out in a living room. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
And that brings us to the end of our 1109th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Dan is at Dan Hill Music. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Electronic Products Recycling Association are at EPRA_Canada. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. And Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _. See you all Wednesday when my guest is Dave Bedini.
Well, I wanna take a streetcar downtown, read Henry Miller and wander around, and drink some Guinness from a tin. 'Cause my UI check has just come in. Ah, where you been? Because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, you've been under my skin for more than 8 years. It's been 8 years of laughter and 8 years of tears. And I don't know what the future can hold or will do for me and you. But I'm a much better man for having known you. Oh, you know that's true because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've been told that there's a sucker born every day. But I wonder who. Yeah, I wonder who. Maybe the one who doesn't realize there's 1,000 shades of gray. 'Cause I know that's true, yes I do. I know it's true, yeah. I know it's true. How about you? Oh, they're picking up trash and they're putting down roads. And they're brokering stocks, the class struggle explodes. And I'll play this guitar just the best that I can. Well, maybe I'm not, and maybe I am. Ah, who gives a damn? Because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've kissed you in France, and I've kissed you in Spain. And I've kissed you in places I better not name. And I've seen the sun go down on Sacré-Cœur. But I